On the morning of billionaire Mafia boss Gabriel Santoro's wedding, a trembling florist stood hidden behind a wall of white roses, clutching a phone that contained evidence capable of destroying the ceremony. Penelope Hayes had spent weeks creating the most expensive floral arrangements of her life. She should have been celebrating the contract that could save her struggling flower shop. Instead, she was staring at a secret that could ruin one of the most powerful men in New York. The bride wasn't in love with Gabriel. She was planning to betray him, and Penelope had proof. The problem was that Gabriel Santoro wasn't just a wealthy groom. He was a feared mafia boss whose name could silence entire rooms. If she spoke, she could lose everything. If she stayed silent, she might watch an innocent man be publicly humiliated in front of hundreds of guests. And with only hours remaining before the ceremony, Penelope was running out of time. But what happened next would change everything. Penelope Hayes never expected flowers to save her life. At 29 years old, she owned a tiny flower shop tucked between a laundromat and a discount grocery store in Brooklyn. The sign above the storefront had faded from years of harsh winters and summer heat. Half the time, one of the letters refused to light up. Business had been getting worse for months. Large online companies were stealing customers. Rising costs were eating away at every dollar she earned. Some weeks she worked 14 hours a day only to discover she had barely made enough to cover expenses. Still, she refused to quit. Flowers were the only thing she had ever truly loved. Every arrangement she created felt like a small piece of art. Unfortunately, art didn't always pay the bills. One rainy Tuesday morning, Penelope sat behind the counter studying a stack of overdue invoices while trying not to panic. The shop smelled of roses, eucalyptus, and fresh peonies. Usually those scents calmed her. Today they didn't. Her landlord had already warned her about late rent. Her flower supplier wanted payment. And her business account contained less money than she wanted to admit. She rubbed her forehead and tried calculating how many weddings she would need to survive another 6 months. The answer wasn't encouraging. That was when her phone rang. The number wasn't familiar. Penelope almost ignored it. Thankfully, she didn't. The woman on the other end introduced herself as an event coordinator representing the Santoro family. Penelope nearly dropped the phone. Everyone in New York knew the name Gabriel Santoro. Some people called him a billionaire businessman. Others called him something else when they thought nobody was listening. A mafia boss. A kingmaker. A man powerful enough to influence politicians, judges, and corporate executives with a single phone call. Nobody knew how much of the rumors were true. But everyone knew one thing. Gabriel Santoro got whatever he wanted. And apparently, Gabriel Santoro wanted flowers. His wedding was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The event planner explained that several luxury floral companies had submitted proposals. For reasons she couldn't understand, Penelope's design portfolio had somehow reached the final selection process. 2 days later, she found herself standing inside Santoro Tower in Manhattan. Everything about the building screamed power. The marble floors, the armed security guards, the private elevators, the employees who immediately stopped talking whenever certain men walked past. Penelope felt completely out of place. Her inexpensive black dress suddenly seemed childish compared to the luxury surrounding her. She instinctively tugged at the fabric around her waist. Years of cruel comments had taught her to be self-conscious. Penelope wasn't slim, never had been. Her body was soft and generously curved. Her hips were wide, her stomach rounded gently beneath her clothing. Her cheeks remained adorably full no matter how much weight she lost. Growing up, classmates had called her names. Co-workers had offered unwanted diet advice. Several dates had politely informed her she would be prettier if she lost a few pounds. Over time, she learned to smile through embarrassment, but she never truly forgot it. The conference room door opened. Penelope's thoughts instantly vanished. Gabriel Santoro walked inside. The atmosphere changed immediately. Not because he demanded attention, because attention automatically followed him. He was tall, broad-shouldered. impeccably dressed. Several men entered behind him and positioned themselves near the walls without speaking. Bodyguards. Nobody had to explain who they were. The room felt smaller the moment Gabriel arrived. Power radiated from him effortlessly. The kind of power that couldn't be purchased, only earned or feared. Gabriel barely glanced at the proposal folders. Instead, he studied the floral samples arranged on the table. For several uncomfortable seconds, Penelope wondered if she had made a mistake. Then he pointed toward a centerpiece featuring ivory roses and cascading orchids. Who designed that? His voice was calm, quiet. Yet every person in the room immediately fell silent. "I did," Penelope answered. Gabriel nodded once, then looked directly at her. "Everyone else tried to impress me." His gaze shifted back to the flowers. "You designed something that feels real." That single sentence changed everything. 3 days later, Penelope received the contract. The amount nearly made her cry. One wedding, one opportunity, one chance to save her business. For the next several weeks, she threw herself completely into the project. She barely slept, barely rested. Her small team worked around the clock preparing thousands of flowers. And as the wedding approached, Penelope became increasingly aware that Gabriel Santoro wasn't the only person everyone watched carefully. His fiancée attracted attention too. Beautiful, elegant, perfect, at least on the surface. But every time Penelope interacted with her, something felt wrong. Something hidden beneath the flawless smile. Something that made the florist's instincts quietly whisper a warning she couldn't yet explain. And 3 days before the wedding, that feeling would finally prove correct. 3 days before the wedding, the Santoro estate looked less like a private residence and more like the command center of a royal coronation. Luxury vehicles moved constantly through the gated entrance. Workers hurried across the grounds, carrying decorations worth more than most people's annual salaries. Security personnel patrolled every corner of the property. Every guest list update required approval. Every delivery was inspected. Every movement was monitored. For Penelope, the pressure felt overwhelming. The wedding represented months of preparation and nearly every dollar her company possessed. One mistake could destroy her reputation. One disaster could bankrupt her. That morning, she arrived before sunrise to supervise the installation of the ceremony arch. The structure stood overlooking the Hudson River. Thousands of ivory roses climbed its frame alongside imported orchids and delicate white peonies. The arrangement was easily the most beautiful thing Penelope had ever created. For a moment, she simply stood there admiring it. The sight made her chest tighten with pride. She had built this. A woman who spent most of her life being overlooked had created something extraordinary. Unfortunately, the feeling didn't last long. An event coordinator rushed toward her moments later with another list of changes requested by the bride. Penelope forced herself to smile. The bride had requested changes almost every day. Different flowers, different colors, different placements, different schedules. Nothing was ever quite right. The strange thing was that none of the requests seemed motivated by excitement. Most brides were emotional, nervous, happy, sometimes stressed, but they were invested. This bride felt detached, almost bored, as if the wedding were merely another business transaction. By early afternoon, Penelope was carrying a sample bouquet toward a private garden pavilion located near the back of the estate. The bride had requested approval before the final arrangements were delivered. Penelope followed the stone pathway through manicured gardens and towering hedges. As she approached the pavilion, she noticed voices inside. At first, she assumed she was interrupting a meeting. She slowed her pace. Then, she heard the bride laughing. Something about the sound made her pause. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't nervous. It was cruel. The kind of laugh someone makes when mocking another person. Penelope instinctively stopped. The partially opened doors revealed nothing, only voices. "You really can't believe he's this easy," another woman said. The bride laughed again. "Oh, please. Gabriel practically worships me." Penelope frowned. She should leave. Immediately. Instead, she found herself frozen in place. The bride continued speaking. 3 more days, and everything changes. Her friend sounded amused. "You mean once you're married?" "Exactly. What about the trust?" The bride lowered her voice slightly, but Penelope could still hear every word. "The lawyers already confirmed it. Once the marriage is official, access becomes much easier." A cold feeling settled in Penelope's stomach. She wasn't intentionally eavesdropping anymore. Now she was listening because something felt wrong. Very wrong. The friend laughed. "You've planned this perfectly." "Of course I have. What about Gabriel?" A brief silence followed. Then came the answer. "What about him?" Both women burst into laughter. Penelope felt her heartbeat quicken. The bride continued. "Do you know what's actually funny?" "What?" "He really thinks I love him." More laughter. The florist stared at the stone pathway beneath her feet. Surely she was misunderstanding. People joked. People vented. Relationships were complicated. Yet, something about the conversation felt calculated, cold, deliberate. The friend spoke again. "So when are you leaving him?" The answer came immediately. "The moment I secure what I need." Penelope's throat tightened. Every instinct told her to walk away. This wasn't her business. She arranged flowers. Nothing more. Nothing less. But then she heard another statement. A statement she couldn't forget. "I almost feel bad for him." The bride paused dramatically. "Almost." The women laughed once more. This time, Penelope physically flinched. She quietly stepped backward and left before anyone noticed her presence. The entire walk back to the main estate felt unreal. Her thoughts raced. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe she lacked context. Maybe she had only heard fragments of a larger conversation. That had to be the explanation. It had to be, because the alternative was much worse. By evening, she was still thinking about it, while arranging flowers, while checking deliveries, while reviewing schedules. The conversation replayed endlessly inside her mind. Later that night, as workers finished decorating the reception hall, Penelope accidentally crossed paths with Gabriel Santoro. He stood near the ballroom entrance, speaking with several men in dark suits. The men listened carefully. Nobody interrupted. Nobody questioned him. The authority surrounding Gabriel was impossible to ignore. One short instruction from him caused 3 people to immediately move. Another sentence sent someone rushing across the room. This was not a man accustomed to betrayal. This was a man accustomed to loyalty. Absolute loyalty. Gabriel noticed her standing nearby. For a moment, their eyes met. Penelope quickly looked away. She suddenly felt guilty. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because she was carrying knowledge he didn't possess. Gabriel gave a small nod. "Everything going smoothly?" The question surprised her. Most billionaires never spoke directly to vendors, yet his tone was polite, respectful. "Yes," Penelope answered. "I think the flowers are ready." Gabriel glanced toward the ballroom. A faint smile appeared. "The arrangements are beautiful." The compliment should have made her happy. Instead, it made her feel worse. Because standing there, looking at him, she found herself asking a question she never wanted to ask. What if the bride really was lying? What if everything she heard was true? And if it was true, how could she possibly stay silent? Unfortunately, the next morning she would discover evidence that transformed suspicion into something far more dangerous. The following morning, Penelope woke up exhausted. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the bride's laughter again, the mocking tone, the casual cruelty, the complete absence of guilt. She kept telling herself to forget it. This wasn't her problem. People made mistakes when they inserted themselves into other people's lives, especially when those people belonged to the Santoro family. By 8 o'clock, she was back at the estate. The wedding was now less than 48 hours away. The atmosphere had changed noticeably. Luxury guests were already beginning to arrive. Black SUVs moved constantly through the property. Private security doubled their presence. Even the staff seemed more nervous. Everyone understood the importance of the event. This wasn't simply a wedding. It was a gathering of some of the most influential people in New York. Politicians, business executives, judges, celebrities, and people whose wealth came from sources nobody openly discussed. Penelope spent the morning supervising flower installations throughout the estate. By lunchtime, she had almost convinced herself to stop thinking about the bride. Then, everything changed. It happened by accident. Just like the first conversation, Penelope had been searching for a misplaced inventory sheet when she entered a temporary office near the reception hall. The room appeared empty. She immediately spotted the document she needed sitting on a desk. As she reached for it, voices approached from the hallway. Instinctively, she stepped behind a divider. A second later, the bride entered with the same friend from the garden pavilion. Penelope's stomach dropped. She couldn't leave without being seen. The women sat down only a few feet away. The bride placed her phone on the desk and smiled. "Everything is ready." Her friend looked excited. "What about the video?" Penelope frowned. "Video?" The bride laughed softly. "Oh, that's the best part." Something in her voice made Penelope's pulse accelerate. "What do you mean?" The bride opened her phone. A moment later, audio began playing. The friend burst out laughing. Penelope couldn't see the screen, but she could hear enough. The video apparently contained edited footage of Gabriel, clips taken from interviews, public appearances, private moments. The editing transformed him into a joke, a fool, an obsessed man blinded by love. The bride seemed delighted. "Can you imagine his face when everyone sees this?" The friend nearly choked from laughter. "In front of the entire wedding?" "Exactly." Penelope felt ice spread through her chest. This wasn't greed anymore. This wasn't a woman planning to leave an unhappy relationship. This was humiliation. Public humiliation. Deliberate, cruel, calculated. The friend shook her head. "You really hate him, don't you?" The bride's expression hardened. For the first time, genuine emotion entered her voice. "I hate what he represents." "What does that mean?" The bride leaned back. "It means I spent 2 years pretending to love him because people like Gabriel Santoro think they can own everything." Her smile returned. "Now everyone will watch him lose." Penelope couldn't believe what she was hearing. The friend lowered her voice. "And after the trust?" The bride nodded. "The trust, the connections, the access." Then she smirked. "And after that, I'm gone." Penelope felt nauseous. This wasn't a marriage. It was a long con. A trap carefully constructed over years. The women eventually left. Several minutes passed before Penelope emerged from hiding. Her hands were trembling. This time, there was no misunderstanding. No missing context. No innocent explanation. She knew exactly what she had heard. And that knowledge created a new problem. What was she supposed to do now? The logical answer was obvious. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. She was a florist, not an investigator, not a family member, not a friend. If she accused the bride without proof, nobody would believe her. Worse, she could lose everything. The wedding contract, her reputation, her business, perhaps even her safety. The bride came from an influential family herself. Making accusations could start a war Penelope wasn't prepared to fight. Yet another voice inside her refused to stay quiet, because every time she imagined remaining silent, she saw Gabriel standing in the ballroom, trusting, confident, completely unaware. The image bothered her more than she wanted to admit. That afternoon, she found herself watching him from across the estate. Gabriel moved through meetings and preparations with calm efficiency. Employees respected him. Security teams obeyed him instantly. Guests greeted him with admiration. Yet, beneath all the power, Penelope noticed something unexpected. Whenever the bride appeared, Gabriel genuinely smiled. Not the polite smile of a businessman, not the controlled expression of a powerful man. A real smile. The smile of someone who believed he had found happiness. That realization hurt, because it meant he had no idea what was coming. For the first time, Penelope understood that her silence carried consequences too. Not speaking was still a choice, and choices had costs. Late that evening, she returned to her flower shop in Brooklyn. The familiar surroundings usually comforted her. Not tonight. She sat alone among buckets of roses and hydrangeas while staring at her phone. Should she call someone? Should she report what she heard? Should she simply walk away? Hours passed. No answer came. Only uncertainty. Only fear. And just when she thought the situation couldn't become more complicated, her phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID displayed a name she never expected to see, Gabriel Santoro. Penelope stared at her phone as it continued ringing. For a moment, she genuinely wondered if she was imagining it. Gabriel Santoro did not call florists. People like Gabriel had assistants for that. Lawyers, managers, entire teams dedicated to handling minor details. Yet his name remained on her screen. After several seconds, she answered. "Hello?" There was a brief pause. Then came the familiar, calm voice. "Miss Hayes." Her stomach tightened. "Mr. Santoro, I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." The fact that one of New York's most powerful men sounded almost apologetic somehow made the conversation more intimidating. "No, sir." Another pause. "I was reviewing tomorrow's schedule." Penelope frowned. "Okay. The coordinator informed me you've been working nearly 18 hours a day." She blinked. Of all the things he could have called about, that wasn't what she expected. Gabriel continued. "You should go home earlier tomorrow." Penelope almost laughed. The statement felt absurd. "There are still arrangements that need supervision. They'll survive." The faint amusement in his voice surprised her. People underestimate how quickly exhaustion creates mistakes. Penelope looked around her dark flower shop. Nobody had said something like that to her in years. Most people only cared about results, not the person creating them. "Thank you," she said quietly. The line went silent again. Then Gabriel asked a question. "Can I ask you something?" Her heartbeat accelerated. "Sure. Why flowers?" The question caught her completely off guard. She expected business, schedules, wedding logistics, not curiosity. Penelope glanced toward a bucket of white roses sitting beside the counter. "My grandmother owned a flower garden." Gabriel remained silent, listening, actually listening. "When I was a kid, I spent every summer helping her." Most people looked at flowers and saw decoration. A small smile appeared on her face. She looked at them and saw stories. What kind of stories? Hope. Apologies. New beginnings. Goodbyes. Gabriel chuckled softly. "That's a very different answer than I expected." "It usually is." For the first time all day, Penelope relaxed slightly. The conversation felt strangely normal, almost comfortable. Then reality returned. The secret, the lies, the approaching wedding, the guilt. Everything crashed back into her mind. She hesitated. For one brief moment, she nearly told him. Nearly. The words reached the edge of her lips. Then fear stopped them. What if she was wrong? What if he thought she was lying? What if he believed she was trying to sabotage the wedding? The opportunity disappeared. A few minutes later, the conversation ended, but after hanging up, Penelope couldn't stop thinking about it. The call had changed something. Gabriel was no longer just a powerful name. He felt human. And that made staying silent even harder. The next morning, she returned to the estate. Wedding day was now less than 24 hours away. Luxury guests filled the property. Private chefs moved through kitchens. Security teams coordinated patrols. The entire estate pulsed with anticipation. Yet Penelope noticed something else. Tension. Subtle. Hidden. But growing. The bride appeared increasingly distracted. Several times Penelope saw her checking her phone nervously. Once, she even snapped at a staff member for no reason. The perfect mask was beginning to crack. Later that afternoon, Penelope carried flowers into one of the reception suites. As she approached the door, she heard raised voices. The bride again, and the same friend. Penelope immediately stopped. This time she wasn't curious. She simply recognized trouble. Then she heard a sentence that froze her in place. "What do you mean he knows?" The bride sounded angry. Panicked. Her friend responded quickly. "I didn't say he knows." "Then why are security people asking questions?" Penelope's pulse accelerated. "Security?" The bride lowered her voice. "Everything is ready, right?" "Yes." "The files?" "Ready." "The transfer accounts?" "Ready." "The video?" "Ready." A long silence followed. Then the bride smiled. Penelope could hear it in her voice. "Good." The friend laughed nervously. "You really want to do this?" The answer came instantly. "I've spent 2 years building this moment." Penelope felt sick. 2 years. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This wasn't temporary greed. This was calculated manipulation stretching across years. The bride continued. "Tomorrow, everyone finally sees Gabriel Santoro fall." The words hit Penelope like ice water. She quietly backed away before they noticed her presence. For several minutes, she wandered the estate without direction. Her thoughts raced. The evidence kept growing. The danger kept growing. And her options kept shrinking. Because now, she knew something else. The bride wasn't merely planning humiliation. There were financial transfers involved. Accounts, files, preparation. This was bigger than she originally believed. Much bigger. As evening approached, Penelope stood alone near the ceremony site overlooking the Hudson River. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The flowers glowed beautifully in the fading light. Normally, the view would have made her happy. Instead, she felt trapped. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "They're incredible." Penelope turned. Gabriel stood behind her. Alone. No bodyguards. No assistants. Just him. His gaze moved across the thousands of flowers surrounding the ceremony arch. "You built all this." Penelope nodded. Gabriel studied the display for several seconds. Then he surprised her again. "My mother loved flowers." Penelope blinked. He rarely spoke about personal matters. "Really?" He nodded. She believed flowers revealed character. A faint smile crossed his face. She used to say people who create beautiful things usually have beautiful hearts. Penelope looked away. The guilt became almost unbearable, because every second she remained silent felt more wrong than the last. Gabriel noticed her discomfort immediately. The man missed very little. "Something's bothering you." Her breath caught. For one dangerous second, she thought he somehow knew everything. "What makes you say that?" "No, you've looked worried all day." "Huh." His dark eyes studied her carefully. Not threatening, concerned. And that was somehow worse, because concern was harder to betray. Penelope opened her mouth, then closed it. Again. Mafia won once more. "I'm just tired." Gabriel didn't seem convinced, but he let it go. For now. As he turned to leave, he stopped, then spoke without looking back. "If there's ever something you think I should know." His voice remained calm. "Tell me." And with those words, Gabriel Santoro walked away, leaving Penelope standing alone beneath the setting sun. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of speaking anymore. She was afraid she might already be too late. Penelope barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gabriel standing beneath the ceremony arch, trusting, completely unaware. By dawn, she had reached a decision. She would tell him. Not because she wanted to get involved, not because she wanted attention, but because she knew she would never forgive herself if she remained silent. Unfortunately, reality proved far more complicated. The estate was already overflowing with guests. Luxury vehicles stretched along the private entrance roads. Security teams monitored every access point. Event coordinators rushed through hallways. Everyone seemed to be moving at twice their normal speed. Finding a private moment with Gabriel became nearly impossible. 3 times Penelope tried. 3 times she failed. Someone always interrupted. An attorney, a family member, a security chief, a politician. The closer the ceremony approached, the fewer opportunities remained. By late morning, panic began replacing determination. Then something unexpected happened. While delivering floral arrangements to a private lounge, Penelope noticed a familiar voice around the corner. The bride, arguing, not pretending, not smiling, arguing. Penelope instinctively slowed her pace. "You're overreacting," the friend whispered. "I'm not overreacting." The bride sounded furious. "You said nobody would notice." "They haven't." "Then why is Gabriel's security chief asking questions?" A silence followed. The friend sounded nervous. "Maybe it's routine." "No." The bride's answer came immediately. "He suspects something." Penelope's pulse accelerated. For the first time, the bride sounded genuinely afraid. The friend lowered her voice. "Then maybe we postpone." The bride laughed bitterly. "After 2 years? No." "What if things go wrong?" "They won't." The bride's voice hardened. "They can't." Penelope carefully shifted position. From where she stood, she could finally see inside the room. Both women were focused on a laptop sitting on the table. Several documents appeared open on the screen. Financial records, transfer agreements, bank information. The bride pointed toward the display. "Everything is already moving." The friend swallowed. "What about the offshore accounts?" Penelope froze. "Offshore accounts?" The bride nodded. "Ready." "And the trust access?" "Ready." "And the media release?" "Do." The bride smiled. "Ready. Media release." Penelope's stomach dropped. This was even worse than she thought. The humiliation wasn't limited to wedding guests. The bride intended to expose Gabriel publicly, nationally, possibly internationally. The friend shook her head. "I still can't believe you pulled this off." The bride leaned back proudly. "People see what they want to see." "And Gabriel?" A cruel smile appeared. Gabriel saw what he wanted to see. For a moment, genuine hatred flashed across her face. He thought money could buy loyalty. The friend looked uncomfortable. "Maybe he actually loved you." The bride laughed. A cold, ugly laugh. "Then he's even more foolish than I thought." Penelope quietly backed away. This time there was no doubt, no uncertainty, no missing context. The bride intended to destroy him completely. Emotionally, financially, publicly. And now Penelope had heard enough to know the threat was real. The question was whether she could prove it. Hours later, an opportunity appeared. Completely by accident. One of the wedding planners mistakenly handed Penelope a decorative box intended for the bridal suite. When she arrived to return it, the room was empty. The bride was elsewhere. The door stood partially open. Penelope placed the box on a table, then noticed something. A laptop, open, unattended. Her heart immediately began racing. She knew she should leave. Immediately. Yet, the screen displayed something she recognized. The same financial documents from earlier. Without thinking, she stepped closer. 1 glance became 2, 2 became 10, and suddenly, everything made sense. Transfer agreements, shell companies, trust access paperwork, media contracts, prepared statements scheduled for release immediately after the ceremony. The bride had planned everything. Every detail, every step, every humiliation. Penelope's hands shook. Then she noticed something even more shocking. A folder labeled Santoro Final. She clicked it. Inside sat the video. The same video the bride had mentioned. The one intended to humiliate Gabriel publicly. Penelope watched only 30 seconds. That was enough. The footage had been edited maliciously. Every vulnerable moment, every emotional statement, every expression of love, twisted into mockery. A weapon disguised as entertainment. Penelope felt physically sick. Without fully thinking, she pulled out her phone. Several photos. A short video recording. Just enough evidence. Just enough proof. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway. Penelope jumped. Her heart nearly stopped. She quickly backed away from the desk. The bride's voice approached. Closer. Closer. Penelope slipped through a side door moments before the women entered. She didn't stop moving until she reached the gardens. Only then did she finally look at her phone. The evidence was there. Clear. Undeniable. Real. For the first time since this nightmare began, she possessed proof. Yet, instead of relief, fear washed over her. Because now, the situation had changed completely. She could no longer pretend uncertainty. She could no longer convince herself she might be wrong. Now she had evidence. Now she had responsibility. And if the bride discovered what she had done, there was no telling what might happen. As evening approached, Penelope sat alone near the riverfront, staring at the photos. A voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. Miss Hayes. She looked up. Two enormous men in dark suits stood nearby. Security. Santoro security. Neither man smiled. Neither man looked friendly. One stepped forward. Mr. Santoro would like to see you. Penelope's breath caught. For a terrifying second, she thought she had been discovered. Then another thought struck her. Maybe fate had finally given her the opportunity she needed, because in her trembling hand sat the evidence that could stop everything. And within minutes, she would be standing face to face with Gabriel Santoro himself. The private office overlooking the Hudson River was silent when Penelope entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glowing lights of New York beyond the water. The room itself felt intimidating. Elegant, powerful. Much like the man standing beside the window, Gabriel Santoro turned as she entered. The two security guards immediately closed the door behind her. Penelope's heart hammered against her ribs. For a brief second, she questioned every decision she had made. Then Gabriel spoke. You look frightened. The observation was calm, not accusatory, not threatening, simply honest. Penelope swallowed. Maybe because two men the size of refrigerators escorted me here. To her surprise, Gabriel smiled, a genuine smile. Small, brief, but real. The tension eased slightly. What did you want to see me about? She asked. Gabriel studied her face. For several moments, neither spoke. Then he moved toward his desk. There have been unusual activities surrounding the wedding. Penelope froze. Gabriel noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not with anger, with focus. The focus of a man accustomed to reading people. Miss Hayes. His voice lowered. Is there something you want to tell me? This was it. The moment she had feared for days. Penelope reached into her pocket. Her fingers trembled. Then she placed her phone on the desk. Gabriel glanced at it, then back at her. I didn't want to get involved, she whispered. I tried not to. The room remained silent. I overheard conversations. Gabriel didn't react. I thought maybe I misunderstood. Still no reaction, so I stayed quiet. Her voice cracked. But then I heard more. She pushed the phone forward. And then I found this. For the first time, Gabriel's expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. He picked up the phone, opened the files, viewed the photographs, the financial documents, the screenshots, the video clip, the prepared statements, the transfer agreements. As he scrolled, the room grew colder. Not physically, emotionally. The change was impossible to miss. Gabriel's face became completely unreadable, dangerously unreadable. 2. When he finally looked up, the warmth from earlier had vanished. This was not the polite groom. This was the Mafia Boss, the man feared across New York, the man powerful people whispered about. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Where did you get these? Penelope told him everything. The conversations, the laptop, the recordings, the hidden plans. Gabriel listened without interruption. When she finished, silence followed. A long silence. Then Gabriel pressed a button on his desk. The door opened instantly. 3 men entered. One wore an expensive suit. Another carried a tablet. The third looked like he had broken bones for a living. Gabriel handed over the phone. Verify everything. The men immediately left. No questions, no hesitation, no discussion. Penelope noticed it instantly. Absolute obedience, the kind only the most powerful leaders inspired. Gabriel walked back toward the window. For several minutes, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. You just saved me. Penelope blinked. I don't know about that. I do. His voice remained calm, controlled. Yet beneath it, she sensed something else. Pain. Real pain. Not because of the money, not because of the business, because someone he trusted had betrayed him. That realization somehow hurt more. Gabriel turned toward her. Why did you tell me? The answer came immediately. Because it was the right thing to do. The room fell silent again. Gabriel stared at her. Not the way powerful men usually looked at people. Not as a tool. Not as an employee. Not as someone beneath him. He looked at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Penelope suddenly became aware of every insecurity she carried. The soft curves she spent years hiding. The roundness of her cheeks. The way her black dress hugged her full figure. The parts of herself she had always been taught were flaws. Instinctively, she crossed her arms. Gabriel noticed. Don't. She frowned. What? Hide. The word caught her off guard. Gabriel's expression softened. You spent days protecting someone who could do nothing for you. His gaze remained steady. That's not weakness, Penelope. It was the first time he had used her first name, and somehow that felt more intimate than anything else. Before she could respond, the office door burst open. The security chief entered. His face looked grim, very grim. Gabriel immediately understood. It's real. The man nodded. Every file. A heavy silence followed. The chief continued. There are also financial crimes. He handed Gabriel a folder. Far more than we expected. Gabriel opened it. His jaw tightened. The room grew still. Dead still. The chief lowered his voice. She planned to execute everything during the reception. Penelope felt sick. Even now, hearing confirmation made the situation feel unreal. Gabriel closed the folder. His expression became terrifyingly calm, the kind of calm that usually appeared before a storm. What happens now? Penelope asked quietly. Gabriel looked toward the glowing lights outside, then back at her. His answer came in a voice so calm it was almost frightening. The wedding continues. Penelope stared at him. What? The wedding continues. Huh. The chief looked surprised. Even the security personnel exchanged glances. Gabriel's eyes hardened. They spent 2 years planning this. He straightened his jacket. Let's not disappoint them. A chill ran down Penelope's spine. For the first time, she realized something important. The bride wasn't the only person capable of planning ahead, and tomorrow, during the wedding ceremony, everyone was about to discover why Gabriel Santoro had become one of the most powerful men in New York. The wedding day arrived beneath clear blue skies. Everything looked perfect. Thousands of white roses lined the ceremony aisle. Crystal chandeliers sparkled beneath the reception tent. Luxury cars continued arriving every few minutes. New York's elite filled the estate. Politicians, celebrities, billionaires, people whose names appeared on magazine covers, and people whose names never appeared anywhere at all. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Nobody suspected what was about to happen. Penelope stood near the back of the ceremony area, trying to remain invisible. After everything that had happened, she wanted nothing more than to disappear into the crowd. Yet Gabriel had insisted she stay. "You deserve to see how this ends." Those words had echoed in her mind all morning. Now she watched guests take their seats while security quietly repositioned themselves around the estate. To everyone else, the movements appeared normal. To Penelope, they looked deliberate, planned. The bride arrived shortly before the ceremony. She looked stunning, elegant, radiant, the picture of a perfect future wife. And that was exactly what made the deception so frightening. The woman smiling for photographers had spent years planning betrayal, yet she seemed completely confident, completely certain she had already won. The ceremony began. Music filled the air. Guests smiled. The officiant welcomed everyone. Then Gabriel Santoro appeared. A ripple moved through the crowd instantly. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit. His expression remained calm, controlled, powerful. Even among New York's elite, he stood apart. Not because he demanded attention, because attention naturally belonged to him. Penelope noticed something immediately. Gabriel showed no sign of anger, no sign of betrayal, no sign that he knew anything. If she hadn't been present during the previous evening, she never would have guessed the truth. The bride clearly felt the same. Her smile widened as she approached the altar. Everything was proceeding exactly as she expected. The vows began. Several guests wiped tears from their eyes. Action. Cameras recorded every second. The bride delivered her vows flawlessly, beautifully, convincingly. The performance deserved an award. Then Gabriel began speaking. His voice carried easily across the ceremony grounds. Calm, steady, confident. He spoke about trust, loyalty, commitment, partnership. The irony was almost painful, yet the bride never seemed to notice. She remained convinced she controlled the situation. The officiant eventually reached the final question, the moment everyone had been waiting for. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence followed. Several seconds passed. The bride smiled. Then Gabriel raised his hand. The officiant stopped. The guests exchanged confused looks. The bride's smile faltered. For the first time all day, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Gabriel slowly turned toward the crowd, then toward the giant projection screens prepared for the evening reception. His voice remained calm. "I object." The entire estate fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The bride stared at him. "What are you doing?" Gabriel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he nodded toward one of his security directors. The large screens activated. At first, guests appeared confused. Then the documents appeared. Financial records, transfer agreements, screenshots, messages, evidence, page after page. The crowd collectively gasped. The bride's face instantly lost all color. "No." The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. Gabriel finally looked at her, not with rage, not with hatred, with disappointment, and somehow that seemed worse. The screens continued displaying evidence, the offshore accounts, the prepared media statements, the trust access plans, the hidden financial arrangements, everything. The bride's friend attempted to leave. Security quietly blocked her path. Panic spread across both women's faces. Guests began whispering, then openly talking, then staring. The same audience that had admired the bride moments earlier now looked at her with shock and judgment. The perfect image collapsed in real time. The bride pointed at Gabriel. "You had no right." "No right?" Gabriel interrupted softly. The softness somehow made his words more powerful. You spent 2 years lying to me." The crowd went completely still. "You planned theft." Another screen changed, displaying additional evidence. "You planned fraud." Another document appeared. "You planned public humiliation." The final video file appeared. The edited footage intended to destroy him. The bride's confidence shattered completely. For the first time, she looked afraid. Truly afraid. The officiant quietly stepped away. Nobody was thinking about a wedding anymore. The ceremony had become a public reckoning. The bride suddenly pointed toward Penelope, standing near the rear of the crowd. Her voice cracked with desperation. She did this. Hundreds of eyes instantly turned. Penelope froze. The attention felt overwhelming, humiliating, terrifying. Years of insecurity rushed back at once. Every cruel joke, every judgmental stare, every moment she had wished she could disappear. The bride's voice rose. That florist ruined everything. For one terrible second, Penelope thought the crowd might believe her. Then Gabriel stepped forward. Immediately. Without hesitation, without doubt, he positioned himself between Penelope and the bride. The gesture stunned everyone, including Penelope. Gabriel's voice carried across the estate. "She saved me." Silence. Absolute silence. Gabriel turned toward the guests. While everyone else lied, his gaze shifted toward Penelope. She told the truth. For the first time in her life, Penelope felt seen. Not for her appearance, not for her size, not for her insecurities, for her character, for her courage, for who she actually was. The bride's family quietly left. Security escorted several individuals away. Lawyers immediately became involved. Investigations would follow. Consequences would follow. Justice would follow. But none of that mattered to Penelope in that moment, because the nightmare was finally over. Several hours later, the guests had departed. The decorations remained. The flowers remained. The sunset painted the Hudson River gold. Penelope stood alone beside the ceremony arch she had built. She thought about returning to Brooklyn, returning to her normal life, returning to her struggling flower shop. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "You never got paid." She turned. Gabriel stood behind her, this time without security, without assistance, without an audience. Only Gabriel. Penelope laughed softly. "I think there were bigger issues today." Gabriel smiled, then handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, a very large check, much larger than the original contract. Penelope stared at it, speechless. "You don't have to do this." "I know." His answer was immediate. Then he stepped closer. Not enough to intimidate, just enough to be honest. "I'd like to take you to dinner." Penelope blinked. For years, she had watched beautiful women receive attention effortlessly. Women who looked nothing like her. Women who never worried about hiding behind flower displays in photographs. Women who never spent half their lives feeling invisible. Yet Gabriel wasn't looking at anyone else. He was looking at her. Only her. "You know, I'm not exactly what people expect." The words escaped before she could stop them. Gabriel's expression softened. "Neither am I." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Penelope laughed. A real laugh. The first genuine laugh she had experienced in days. "Okay," Gabriel smiled. And somehow that simple smile felt more meaningful than the entire wedding ever had. 6 months later, Penelope's flower shop became one of the most sought-after floral studios in New York. Not because of scandal, not because of publicity, because her work was extraordinary, and because people finally noticed what had always been there. As for Gabriel Santoro, he never forgot the woman who chose honesty when silence would have been easier. Sometimes the person who changes your life isn't the one standing beside you at the altar. Sometimes it's the person brave enough to tell you the truth. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. What would you have done in Penelope's position? Would you have stayed silent or revealed the truth? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
You're wrong. The quiet correction froze an entire boardroom. The words themselves were calm, almost apologetic, yet they carried enough weight to silence 23 executives in an instant. Pens stopped moving. Coffee cups hovered halfway to waiting lips. Every pair of eyes shifted toward the woman, seated halfway down the polished conference table. Claire Monroe didn't appear to notice the panic she had just created. She simply adjusted her glasses, glanced once more at the financial projection displayed across the enormous screen, and repeated herself. "I'm sorry, Mr. DeMarco, but the acquisition model contains a calculation error." No one breathed. Across the table sat Adrian DeMarco. His reputation reached far beyond finance. Business competitors feared negotiating against him. Corporate lawyers dreaded facing him. Investors trusted his judgment almost blindly. Within the DeMarco Group, one unspoken rule existed above every written company policy. Never tell Adrian DeMarco he is wrong. Not in public. Not in private. Not ever. The directors exchanged nervous glances. Several silently wondered whether human resources would need to escort the new accountant from the building before lunch. Claire, however, remained perfectly composed. She wasn't trying to challenge authority. She genuinely believed numbers deserved honesty. Nothing more. She stood, walked toward the presentation screen, and requested the wireless controller. No one moved. Finally, Adrian himself handed it to her without saying a word. She typed 3 numbers, deleted 1 decimal, adjusted a depreciation schedule, then stepped aside. There. The updated projection appeared instantly. Projected acquisition cost, $18 million lower. The room stared. One executive quickly opened his laptop calculator. Another reviewed the spreadsheet line by line. A third quietly whispered an amount under his breath before looking visibly pale. Claire had found an accounting assumption duplicated across 2 subsidiaries, a mistake so small it hid comfortably inside hundreds of pages. A mistake worth $18 million. Silence stretched across the room. Everyone waited for Adrian's response. Instead of speaking immediately, he studied the revised figures. Then he looked toward Claire. Not with anger, with curiosity. Finally, the corners of his mouth lifted, barely enough to qualify as a smile. "Continue." Several executives nearly dropped their pens. That single word became company gossip before the meeting even ended. Claire Monroe had joined the DeMarco Group only 9 days earlier. Officially, she had been recruited as a forensic accountant to strengthen compliance across the corporation's expanding network of banks, logistics companies, hotels, and investment firms. Unofficially, many employees believed she had accepted an impossible assignment. No outsider remained comfortable inside Adrian DeMarco's organization for very long. The expectations were relentless, the standards even higher. Yet Claire approached her first week with remarkable simplicity. If paperwork balanced, she approved it. If numbers failed to balance, she fixed them. If someone disliked her conclusions, that wasn't mathematics, that was emotion, and emotions rarely impressed accountants. By Wednesday morning, she had already returned 6 incomplete reports. By Thursday afternoon, she rejected 2 departmental budgets because the assumptions relied on optimism rather than evidence. By Friday, nearly every finance manager knew her name. Not because she sought attention, because every correction created another wave of nervous whispers. Does she know who she's talking to? Someone should warn her. She'll never survive probation. Claire heard none of it. She wore headphones while reviewing spreadsheets. She preferred herbal tea to office gossip, Lunch usually consisted of whatever sandwich happened to be closest to the accounting floor refrigerator. The growing reputation surrounding her seemed almost invisible. Unfortunately for everyone else, Adrian noticed, the following Monday introduced another confrontation, this time inside the Executive Budgeting Committee. Adrian outlined an aggressive expansion strategy involving 3 regional logistics hubs. The proposal impressed nearly everyone. Heads nodded around the table almost automatically, until one voice interrupted. "The timeline is unrealistic." Every executive closed their eyes for a brief second. Claire wasn't criticizing the strategy, only the schedule. She calmly opened another spreadsheet. The construction estimates assume perfect weather. She clicked again. The labor availability assumes 0 contractor delays. Another click. And these transportation costs ignore seasonal fuel fluctuations. She looked directly toward Adrian. "You'll still make money." She paused. "Just 6 months later than you've predicted." Silence. Again. One director quietly prepared himself for disaster. Instead, Adrian leaned back, studied her projections, asked 3 questions, lost all 3. The revised schedule became official before the meeting ended. No one mentioned the original timeline again, but everyone noticed something unusual. Adrian argued fiercely. Claire answered calmly. Neither raised their voice. Neither became offended. One simply cared about winning. The other cared about being accurate. Accuracy won. Again. Within 2 weeks, an entirely new game developed inside headquarters. Employees began making private bets, not involving money, only coffee. "How long until Miss Monroe corrects today's executive meeting?" 7 minutes. I'll take 4. My guess is before Adrian finishes his second slide. The accounting department pretended not to participate. They participated enthusiastically. Even senior managers occasionally wandered past conference rooms simply to observe. Not because conflict entertained them, because watching someone disagree with Adrian and survive felt almost impossible. Claire remained completely unaware she had become the company's favorite spectator sport. To her, every conversation followed the same simple principle. If someone asked for her professional opinion, she gave it. Whether they liked it remained entirely their responsibility. Across the executive floor, Adrian found himself looking toward the accounting department more often than necessary, for reasons he hadn't yet bothered to explain. By the beginning of Claire Monroe's 3rd week, something extraordinary had happened inside the DeMarco Group. The finance department had become calmer. Invoices that once wandered between desks for days were processed before noon. Monthly reports arrived complete instead of mostly finished. Expense requests no longer disappeared into mysterious folders labeled pending review. Nobody understood how one accountant had reorganized an entire department so quickly. Claire insisted it wasn't complicated. "People don't make mistakes because they're incompetent," she explained one morning while rearranging stacks of reports. "They make mistakes because everyone assumes someone else checked first." The sentence spread through headquarters almost as quickly as the story about the $18 million calculation. Soon, employees found themselves double-checking everything. Not because Adrian demanded perfection, because Claire probably would. Unfortunately for Adrian, Claire's attention eventually turned toward him. She discovered an uncomfortable pattern while reviewing executive approvals. Nearly every major document carried Adrian's signature. Many had been signed after midnight. Several lacked supporting schedules. 2 contained handwritten notes instead of complete financial summaries. One afternoon, she appeared outside his office carrying a thick blue folder. His assistant looked alarmed. "Miss Monroe, the boss is preparing for a meeting. It'll only take a minute." Without waiting for permission, Claire knocked once and entered. Adrian glanced up from his desk. You usually bring bad news. I bring unfinished paperwork. She placed the folder directly in front of him. You signed these. I know. You shouldn't have. One eyebrow lifted. I wasn't aware my own signature required approval. It doesn't. She opened the first file. This acquisition summary is missing 3 appendices. The second. This contract references a risk analysis that isn't attached. The third. You approved revised operating expenses before anyone calculated projected maintenance costs. Adrian folded his hands calmly. I trusted my executives. Claire nodded. They're competent. Another page turned. They're also human. Silence lingered for several seconds. Finally, she slid a small yellow sticky note across the desk. Written neatly across the top were 4 words. Read before you sign. Adrian stared at it. Then at her. You're assigning homework. I'm preventing expensive mistakes. I've managed companies for 15 years, and you've probably been busy for all 15. She smiled politely. I'm simply helping. For the first time in years, someone had confiscated the Mafia Boss's paperwork. The next battle arrived less than 48 hours later, at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. Claire stepped into another executive strategy meeting carrying a tray. Not of reports, sandwiches. The discussion immediately stopped. One director whispered, "What's happening?" Claire ignored him. She placed a sandwich in front of Adrian, another beside the chief legal officer, a third beside operations, then crossed her arms. Lunch? Adrian blinked. We're discussing a merger. You've been discussing it since 11. We're almost finished. Claire looked around the room. Has anyone here eaten today? No one answered. She sighed. That explains the acquisition proposal. One executive quietly lowered his eyes. Another unsuccessfully hid a smile. Adrian remained perfectly serious. Miss Monroe. Yes? This meeting is important. So is blood sugar. We'll eat afterward. You won't? She pointed toward the untouched coffee cups. You've each consumed approximately 6 cups of caffeine. Another glance around the table. You're all negotiating while hungry. She paused. Hungry people approve terrible budgets. The room became suspiciously quiet. Nobody wanted to laugh first. Finally, Adrian asked, Is this an accounting principle? No. It's biology. Another pause. Then something almost unbelievable happened. Adrian reached for the sandwich. Without another word, everyone else did the same. The merger discussion resumed 15 minutes later. It proved noticeably shorter, and considerably more productive. The stories multiplied. Claire introduced mandatory 15-minute coffee breaks for department heads during quarterly reporting. She refused to schedule meetings beginning after 6 in the evening unless genuine emergencies existed. She even convinced information technology to install automatic reminders requiring executives to review supporting documents before submitting approvals. Employees watched the transformation with endless fascination. Every new policy seemed destined to trigger another disagreement. Every disagreement somehow ended exactly the same way. Adrian argued. Claire listened. Claire explained. Adrian reluctantly agreed. The accounting department eventually created an unofficial office tradition. Whenever Adrian appeared on their floor, someone quietly checked the clock. 8 minutes? I'll say 6. No chance. Today's topic looks serious. I still think she'll win. No money ever changed hands. Only coffee. The winner enjoyed free espresso for the day. Oddly enough, Claire never realized she was the subject of the predictions. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Adrian surprised everyone by walking directly into the finance department without his usual entourage. Conversations immediately stopped. Employees pretended to work with exaggerated concentration. Claire didn't look up from her monitor. "Good afternoon. I need yesterday's compliance report. It's on your desk. I wanted another copy. You already have 3. I prefer paper." She finally looked at him. "You prefer excuses." A junior accountant nearly choked on his coffee. Adrian remained expressionless. "Perhaps." Claire opened a drawer, removed another copy, but instead of handing it over, she held on to it. "Did you finish reading the previous version?" "I skimmed it." She frowned. "That's not reading." "I understood the important parts." She flipped directly to page 27. "What does footnote 12 say?" Silence. He didn't answer. Claire nodded once, exactly as though confirming a mathematical proof. "I'll keep this copy until you've finished the first one." The finance department collectively forgot how to breathe. She had just denied Adrian DeMarco access to his own report. After several long seconds, he laughed. Not loudly, just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I appear to have lost again." Claire finally handed him the report. "You'll lose less often if you finish your homework." He accepted the file with remarkable dignity. "I'll consider that constructive criticism." It wasn't criticism. What was it? She smiled. Preventive maintenance. That evening, long after most employees had gone home, Adrian stood alone inside his office, overlooking the city skyline. His chief advisor entered quietly. "You seem happier lately." Adrian continued reading the corrected compliance report. "I've been corrected 12 times this week." 14. Adrian looked up. "You've been counting?" "The entire building has." The advisor hesitated before adding with careful amusement, "People used to fear your meetings. And now? Now they wonder what Miss Monroe will argue about." For a moment, Adrian said nothing. Then an almost imperceptible smile appeared. "They're becoming more efficient." "Because of the meetings?" "No." He closed the folder. "Because someone finally has the courage to tell me when I'm wrong." Outside his office, the lights of the city stretched endlessly into the night. Inside the DeMarco group, a quiet revolution had begun, and not a single person realized that the most feared mafia boss in the city had already started looking forward to losing their next argument. By the second month of Claire Monroe's employment, an unexpected problem had emerged inside the DeMarco group. The accounting department had become the busiest destination in headquarters, not because tax season had arrived, because Adrian DeMarco suddenly seemed fascinated by financial reports. No one believed it, especially not the finance team. The boss, who once requested digital summaries delivered directly to his office, now appeared in person almost every day. Sometimes he claimed he wanted to review quarterly projections. Other times he needed clarification on compliance procedures. Occasionally, he insisted the lighting in accounting was somehow better for reading. No one dared challenge the explanation. No one believed it either. On Monday morning, Adrian arrived carrying a folder barely 5 pages thick. Claire looked up from her monitor. "You walked 4 floors for that?" "I happened to be nearby." She glanced toward the elevator. "Your office is in the opposite direction. I was inspecting the building." "The finance department?" "The entire building." She nodded thoughtfully. "Convenient. What is?" "That every inspection somehow ends beside my desk." Several accountants suddenly became fascinated by their keyboards. One quietly removed his headphones without pretending otherwise. Claire opened Adrian's folder. "This report is already correct." "I know. Then why bring it?" "I wanted your confirmation." She handed it back immediately. "Confirmed." He remained standing. She returned to her spreadsheet. After nearly 15 silent seconds, Claire looked up again. Was there something else?
Adrian appeared to consider the question very carefully. No. Then why are you still here? I appreciate efficient departments. She smiled politely. You've appreciated this one every day this week. Without another word, Adrian accepted the report and walked away. The moment the elevator doors closed, the entire accounting floor erupted into suppressed laughter. It's official, whispered Ethan, one of the senior auditors. The boss has forgotten where his own office is. Claire frowned. He probably enjoys observing different departments. 20 people exchanged amused glances. No one corrected her. The visits continued. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each excuse became increasingly creative. I need to verify expense classifications. The legal department misplaced a document. I wanted your opinion about printer placement. Claire blinked. Printer placement? The current arrangement seems inefficient. She looked toward the printer. It's been there for 6 years. Exactly. I don't understand. You aren't supposed to. She shrugged. All right, then returned to work. Adrian remained another 8 minutes discussing office supply storage with absolutely no enthusiasm. The finance department concluded he deserved an award for determination. A week later, the annual executive performance review brought together department heads from across the company. During a break between presentations, Michael Reeves, Director of Corporate Strategy, approached Claire near the refreshment table. I've been meaning to tell you something. Claire accepted a cup of tea. All right. The logistics audit you redesigned? Yes. It saved us almost $4 million. I'm glad. Michael smiled warmly. You don't get enough credit around here. Claire looked genuinely puzzled. I receive a salary. I mean recognition. The reports are recognition. No. He laughed softly. I mean, people should know how talented you are. Claire lowered her eyes for a moment, slightly embarrassed. Thank you. It was well deserved. Neither noticed Adrian entering the room. He heard only the final sentence. People should know how talented you are. His expression remained perfectly calm, almost too calm. He approached them with measured confidence. Michael. Boss! I've just remembered something. What is it? The Nevada acquisition documents. Michael frowned. They're finished. They require another review. I reviewed them yesterday. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. And now I'd like you to review them. In Nevada. Michael blinked. The state? Yes. The office there requested assistance. Claire looked between them. I thought the Nevada office passed its audit last month. It did, Adrian answered without hesitation. They've requested preventative oversight. Michael stared at him. You created a business trip. I created an opportunity. For what? Professional development. A long silence followed. Finally, Michael sighed with the unmistakable expression of a man who understood exactly what had just happened. I'll pack tonight. Excellent. As Michael walked away, Claire looked genuinely concerned. Was that really necessary? Adrian folded his hands behind his back. The Nevada office deserves experienced leadership. She accepted the explanation immediately. That's thoughtful. Across the room, Michael nearly laughed out loud. The story spread faster than any company rumor in recent memory. By lunchtime, everyone knew. The boss had reassigned a senior executive less than 5 minutes after he complimented Claire. Human resources pretended not to notice. Legal refused to comment. Operations started a betting pool. Not about whether Adrian admired Claire. That question had already been answered. The new wager involved something else entirely. How long would it take before Claire realized? Predictions ranged from 3 weeks to never. Claire remained spectacularly oblivious. When her assistant cautiously mentioned that the boss visited unusually often, Claire offered a perfectly logical explanation. He enjoys auditing. The assistant struggled to maintain a straight face.
He enjoys auditing? Some people collect stamps. Yes, apparently he collects financial reports. The assistant later repeated the conversation to 3 colleagues. By the end of the afternoon, half the building was laughing. Not at Claire, at the astonishing innocence that allowed a woman brilliant enough to uncover million-dollar accounting errors to completely overlook the obvious. Adrian himself seemed blissfully unaware of his own behavior. One afternoon he entered accounting, carrying absolutely nothing. Claire immediately noticed. "You forgot the report." "What report?" "The one you usually pretend to need." He hesitated. "I've already read today's. So why are you here?" He looked around the department as though searching for inspiration. "I wanted to observe workplace efficiency." Claire considered the answer, then pointed toward an empty chair beside her desk. "You'll observe more efficiently if you stop standing in the aisle." He sat for nearly 20 minutes, without speaking. Claire worked peacefully through spreadsheets, while Adrian reviewed documents he had clearly finished earlier. Finally, she broke the silence. "Can I ask something?" "Of course. Do executive offices become lonely?" He looked surprised. "What makes you ask that? You spend an unusual amount of time down here." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "I assumed perhaps it was quieter, for the first time in years." Adrian DeMarco found himself completely speechless. Across the department, 3 accountants suddenly became very interested in filing cabinets, so they wouldn't burst into laughter. After several seconds, Adrian quietly replied, "It is quieter." Claire smiled. "I thought so. If you ever need a place to work without interruptions." She gestured toward the empty desk across from hers. "You're welcome to use it." The entire accounting floor froze. The most feared mafia boss in the city had just been offered a spare desk in accounting. Adrian glanced at the modest workstation, then back at Claire. A rare warmth softened his usually unreadable expression. "I appreciate the invitation. You'll need your own calculator. I'll remember that." That evening, as employees packed their bags, 2 veteran capos waited outside Adrian's office. One looked toward the accounting floor. "Do you think she knows?" The older capo chuckled. "Not even slightly." "And the boss?" "He probably thinks he's hiding it." They both laughed quietly. Inside his office, Adrian stood by the window overlooking the city, absent-mindedly holding a calculator Claire had loaned him earlier that afternoon. He glanced at it once, then smiled to himself. Somewhere between the endless meetings, the corrected spreadsheets, the confiscated paperwork, and the daily arguments he never seemed to win, he had stopped visiting accounting because he needed financial advice. Now, he simply liked ending his day wherever Claire Monroe happened to be. And the funniest secret in the entire DeMarco group was that everyone knew it. Everyone, except Claire. Autumn arrived with the DeMarco Foundation's annual charity gala. Unlike ordinary corporate dinners, the event gathered the city's most influential bankers, judges, investors, philanthropists, and business leaders beneath one crystal-lit ballroom. The evening was designed to celebrate success. It was also where reputations quietly rose, or disappeared. Claire had almost declined the invitation. "I'll spend the entire night explaining accounting," she had told her assistant. "You'll spend the night representing the company," her assistant corrected gently. "There's a difference." Reluctantly, Claire agreed. She wore a simple navy blue evening gown that emphasized comfort more than fashion. No extravagant jewelry. No dramatic makeup. Only quiet confidence. Several employees hardly recognized her when she entered the ballroom, not because she looked like someone different, because she looked exactly like herself. Comfortable, authentic, uninterested in impressing anyone. Across the room, Adrian noticed her almost immediately. He had attended hundreds of formal events, yet for several seconds, The conversations around him seemed to disappear. Someone else noticed as well. Isabella Thornton, elegant, graceful, the daughter of one of the city's oldest banking families. For years, society columns had casually linked her name with Adrian's. Neither family confirmed the rumors. Neither denied them. Isabella had long assumed time would eventually settle the matter. Then Claire Monroe appeared. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't politically connected. She wasn't interested in elite social circles. Yet somehow, she had accomplished something Isabella never had. She made Adrian smile. Not often, not dramatically, but genuinely. That alone felt unforgivable. The evening progressed with speeches celebrating the Foundation's charitable projects. Executives received recognition one after another. Department heads accepted applause. Project directors stood for photographs. Finally, Isabella approached the stage to thank the leadership team on behalf of several partner institutions. She smiled with effortless elegance. "I'd like to recognize the extraordinary people whose leadership made this remarkable year possible." One by one, she announced names. Operations, legal, corporate strategy, investment banking, hospitality, logistics. Each executive received warm applause. Claire waited politely. She assumed accounting simply wasn't part of the presentation. Then Isabella looked directly toward her. A perfectly pleasant smile remained on her face. "Of course." She paused delicately. "We should also appreciate those who work diligently behind the scenes." Several guests shifted uneasily. "Some people," Isabella continued smoothly, "are excellent with calculators." A few uncomfortable smiles appeared around the ballroom. But leadership requires far more than numbers. Silence settled across the room. The words contained no insult anyone could openly criticize. Yet everyone understood exactly whom they targeted. Every executive from the DeMarco group slowly turned toward Claire, waiting. Would she defend herself? Challenge Isabella. Leave? Claire simply lowered her eyes, then offered a small nod, a calm one. She quietly picked up her glass of water and prepared to return to her seat. She refused to compete for dignity. Sometimes, silence carried more confidence than any argument. Around the ballroom, several guests suddenly found Isabella's remarks far less graceful than they had first appeared. Claire's refusal to retaliate made the insult seem smaller, and Isabella's intentions much larger. From across the room, Adrian had watched enough. He did not interrupt Isabella. He did not raise his voice. He did not embarrass her. Instead, he calmly walked onto the stage after the applause faded. "Before we conclude the evening," his voice remained steady, "I'd like to share something." He nodded toward the audiovisual technician. "The acquisition summary, please." The enormous screen behind him illuminated. Charts appeared. Financial timelines. Completed mergers. Corporate expansions. Investment growth. Many guests assumed they were about to hear another routine business presentation. Instead, Adrian pressed the remote. The first acquisition appeared. A small annotation highlighted one accounting adjustment. Accounting risk identified. Claire Monroe. The next slide. Another acquisition. Compliance exposure prevented. Claire Monroe. Another. Undisclosed liability detected. Claire Monroe. Again, again, again. The ballroom grew completely silent. Every major expansion completed during the previous year carried the same quiet signature. Not public speeches, not negotiations, not headlines. Careful work, patient analysis, the courage to tell powerful people uncomfortable truths. Adrian looked toward the audience. These projects generated thousands of jobs. Another slide appeared. They protected retirement funds. Another. They expanded charitable programs. He slowly lowered the presentation remote. and nearly every one of them succeeded because someone refused to let us make expensive mistakes. His gaze settled gently on Claire. You've heard my name attached to these achievements. A faint smile crossed his face. Tonight, I'd like everyone to meet the person who truly protected them. The ballroom erupted into sincere applause. Not polite applause. Grateful applause. Many executives stood. Several investors joined them. One by one, the room rose to its feet. Claire remained frozen beside her chair. She looked almost alarmed. "They're applauding the wrong person," she whispered. The chief legal officer smiled warmly. No. They finally found the right one. Adrian walked toward the head table. Without hurry. Without ceremony. He placed one hand on the chair reserved for him throughout the evening. The symbolic seat of authority. Then, he quietly pulled it away from the table. Every camera turned. Every conversation stopped. He looked toward Claire. "This chair," he said calmly, "has been occupied by the loudest voice in the room for too long." A few guests exchanged puzzled looks. He smiled. "Tonight, it belongs to the person who earned everyone's trust." He gestured toward the chair. "Claire." She stared at him. "I don't think." For once, his eyes softened with unmistakable warmth. "Don't argue with me." The ballroom burst into laughter. Even Claire couldn't suppress a smile. She slowly walked forward, while the applause continued. Instead of sitting immediately, she looked at Adrian. "I'll only borrow it." He shook his head. "You've been carrying this company for months. It's only a chair." "No," he answered quietly enough that only she could hear. "It's respect." For the first time since joining the DeMarco group, Claire found herself completely speechless. She accepted the seat, not because it elevated her, because refusing would diminish everyone who had chosen to recognize her. The following Monday felt strangely ordinary. The accounting department still smelled faintly of fresh coffee. Printers still jammed. Someone still misplaced expense receipts. Claire quietly returned to work, as though nothing remarkable had happened. Which, in her opinion, nothing had. 3 weeks later, the board unanimously approved her promotion. Chief Financial Officer, the youngest in company history. No one objected. In truth, most wondered why it hadn't happened sooner. Power, however, changed remarkably little. Claire still corrected spreadsheets, still returned incomplete reports, still refused to approve budgets lacking evidence. She also continued confiscating Adrian's paperwork whenever he attempted to sign documents too quickly. One afternoon, she entered his office carrying another familiar blue folder. "You skipped lunch." "I'm busy." "You've said that every Tuesday. I'm preparing an investment announcement." She placed a neatly wrapped sandwich beside his keyboard. "You can prepare while chewing. I have a meeting." "So does your stomach." He sighed dramatically. "You've become impossible." "No," she smiled. "I've become consistent." He accepted the sandwich. Again. Life inside the DeMarco group eventually settled into its own peculiar rhythm. Everyone accepted that the boss lost most arguments involving Claire. Everyone accepted that this somehow made the company stronger. Then came the arrival of a newly hired executive vice president. On his second day, he witnessed Claire interrupt Adrian during an investment briefing. "You forgot page 14. The room instantly fell silent. The new executive looked horrified. Across the table, Adrian calmly flipped through the report. Page 13. Then, nothing. He frowned, reached beneath another folder. There it was, page 14. He closed his eyes for one brief second. Without saying a word, he handed the entire report to Claire. The executives around the table immediately burst into laughter. Claire accepted the folder with quiet satisfaction. "I'll consider that today's victory." The new vice president leaned toward one of the senior capos.
speaking barely above a whisper. Does the boss always let her speak to him like that? The older capo chuckled. No. The younger man looked confused. No? He simply realized. The capo smiled knowingly. She's usually right. After the meeting, Adrian caught up with Claire outside the conference room. She handed back the corrected report. You should organize your paperwork. I know. You keep saying that. I do. She folded her arms. So why haven't you improved? He stepped a little closer, close enough that only she could hear his answer. Because every time you prove me wrong. He looked directly into her eyes. You make my empire stronger. Claire's confident expression softened. A faint blush warmed her cheeks. She searched for a practical reply. Couldn't find one. Then Adrian added, with the same quiet sincerity that had surprised everyone at the gala. And every time you smile, you make my day easier. For perhaps the first time in her career, Claire Monroe had no correction to offer. Only a smile, a genuine one. Behind them, several executives discreetly pretended to organize documents while absolutely listening to every word. The accounting department would undoubtedly hear about this within minutes. No one minded. Some stories deserved to spread. Months later, visitors often asked what made the DeMarco Group different from every other powerful corporation in the city. The answer was never found in financial statements, nor in market share, nor in intimidating leadership. It lived in a conference room where the city's most feared mafia boss no longer needed to win every argument, because he had discovered something far more valuable than always being right. He had found someone courageous enough to challenge him, wise enough to improve him, and kind enough to do it without ever trying to make him feel small. Their relationship was never built on dramatic rescues. It wasn't forged through danger or grand declarations. It grew from shared respect, playful debates, quiet trust, and the certainty that love isn't measured by how often two people agree. Sometimes, the strongest partnership begins with the courage to say, "You're wrong," and with the wisdom to smile